Hey, thanks for checking out this long version of me working. Uh, Again, like the prior two videos, if you're not a software developer, then there's a good chance that this is not the video you want to be watching. I also have a short version, and that short version really kind of cuts to the chase and what the main points of what we learned today are. If you want to see firsthand how AI does and does not make things easier for me, then the long version is definitely worth checking out for that reason. Otherwise, all right, so we're going to check in on our pull request and see how things are doing. It looks like we're still languishing. To recap, the feature's built. And my perspective as a person who's worked in many startups is that you don't go for perfection, you just worry about what people ask for, etc. I do find myself frequently revisiting things, and when I revisit them, I oftentimes have a better idea about how they should act. So, again, the feedback they originally gave was that they wanted to see that you could make it extensible. I was very specifically solving for a use case where you have a single page web app and it requires JavaScript in order to work. If you don't have JavaScript enabled, you have a static page that shows instead. He's suggesting that rather than supporting only NoScript, you just make it an extendable thing. And the reason I was pushing back on that is because I believe the NoScript use case is a very common use case, and so someone wanting to do it would want it to basically be like, where do I put NoScript? And if you replace it with something generic, it's not going to be obvious that that is the solution to the problem. And likewise, I don't see a good reason for them to put anything else there. If you have your web app that's single page, it's probably not a good idea to try to convolute up the rest of it. We have a prescribed way of doing things, and you want to keep it so that there is just one obvious way of doing something. As close as possible, that's your goal. In fact, there's something called the Zen of Python, which I will show you. And it's kind of like a poem. It's called PEP 20, the Zen of Python, and it was, created back in 2004. And basically it goes like this. Beautiful is better than ugly. Explicit is better than implicit. So right there on line 2, explicitly saying no script goes here is better than implicitly understanding that no script goes there. Simple is better than complex. One argument is simple. Complex is better than complicated. Okay, so if it starts to become complicated, maybe it's better to refactor it. But we are not there yet. Flat is better than nested, so then a single argument is better. Readability counts, ever, never, shouldn't pass silently, etc. There's a bit to this, but the gist of it is, let's see, right here. There should be one, and preferably one, obvious way to do it. And I believe that's what my way of doing it fits. Okay, so this is what I've crafted. Update the HTML NoScript string or path argument to support taking in a component decorated function as well. Rename the argument appropriately. When a component decorated function is passed in, it should be rendered to a string. So it seems viable. The main thing is the AI needs to look up, how do I render it to a string? I know such a function does exist. I'm curious if it's going to pull the correct function or try to craft its own solution. And I've changed the permissions to full access to hopefully not encounter those issues I saw in my last video. So there appears to be like a steer function or steer button here. I'm clicking it, but it doesn't seem to act like it's doing anything. I essentially didn't want it to write tests, or rather run them. Because we know that's broke. I need to fix the environment. I'm probably going to fix it so that PyTest just works. All right. So let's take a look at the changes. So they do have something that does this codex diff. So that makes it easy to go through the files, but mentally I do find this a little easier to look at, to go file by file that way. Let's see if we can find where, okay. So under utils, we added, so it calls ReactPy to string on the component. It assumes the component takes no arguments. So we might have to handle a case where that doesn't work. Actually, no. I think that's correct. It always calls a function. You can look at how ReactPy the string is used in examples. Let's see, that's ours. So here's something that's initial. It's a VDOM dict. And I believe when something's decorated, that's what it returns. So that might be correct. So let's take a look at our tests. We should have a new component. Yeah, that should work, I think. Same thing for standalone. Let's give that a try. So what else did we change besides renaming it? So we had this that we already looked at. A zero argument component constructor. So that's confusing. So let's try getting it to describe that a little better. So rather than do deep research on why it maybe did that, I'm just going to go and say, is there a reason we don't just call it a component? It agrees it's better, which means very little with AI. It'll often agree with you. Or component whose rendered contents are wrapped in a NoScript tag. Some more confusion. Okay, that seems okay. So let's go ahead and push these changes and we'll let the CI test it, which isn't a good practice, but when our dev environment's broken, that's oftentimes quicker. We can work on fixing that next. All right, so we switch back to the dev container branch. We're going to go ahead and just do a rebuild and see if things are broken from a clean rebuild. All right, so now we have rebuilt the container, nothing errored. And if I remember correctly, if we go to our instructions, we should be able to run this command and watch things pass. So it says bun is not found. Let me just double check something. So bun is missing. Let's check the container creation log. Don't see any sign. On dev container, we did have bun install location. So that seems like that's what's missing. All right, I've stopped and started the code space. Let me see if bun is now in the path. Still not in the path. Okay, is remote environment even a thing? Is bun install on here? So I'm going to have Claude look up why the dev container configuration might not be working as expected. It's always good to remember that specific vendors like Codespaces might do things differently. So even though it is a solution for dev containers, it might have its own way of being configured. And I'm using Claude instead of OpenAI, ChatGPT here, is because I've historically had issues with ChatGPT giving me speculative solutions and not being like, I don't know. So I ended up spending time implementing its speculative solution only to discover that there was no evidence to really back it up. It was just guessing. I heard Claude is better at that, so let's see if that's the case. And it's important that it searches the web to understand how to do that. Now, the challenge with dev containers is that it's been a bit of a moving target. So something that used to work 2 years ago might not work now. So this says it should be correct. So one of the things that might be happening is that, yeah, so this is basically in line to what I was thinking, was that that is not the way you would update the path. I don't know if I'm going to go through the effort of changing things. Instead, I will look into, yeah, maybe doing something like that. So it does look like that Bun has its own extension for Visual Studio Code, so why don't we try that? We're going to trust the publisher and install. I don't see anything here, but we can now see that Bun tests are in here. So that looks okay. So then the next question is, how do we get our Python test running? I don't see a hatch extension, and we definitely install PyTest, but when we try to run PyTest, it doesn't work. So something is wrong to where it's not actually running that environment. And I believe we do have a virtual environment here, but it looks empty. We can see that we're configured to use it using, I guess, UV. So it would be good to have this working correctly. I wonder if AI knows or can figure out the reason. So I've already included pyproject.toml as the reference file, so I don't need to tell it where to find this and what I'm not talking about. Instead, I'm going to ask, why is it not installed? Okay, so then riddle me this, Batman. Okay. So now we're going to ask, how do we use the very thing that we would be expecting to use? It says hatch shell Python should have it. So let's give that a try. All right, hatch shell Python. Okay, so then pytest help. Didn't immediately fail, so that seems to me that it is in fact installed here. Okay, so then the question is, we have multiple environments here based off of whether it's test or Python. So we go over here. So we go over here and refresh. It still doesn't do it, probably because it doesn't know to switch to that. So again, let's try using AI and see if this can save us a little bit of time. Okay, so it's telling me, but it's not making the changes. All right, let's take a look at them before we do the rebuild. All right, so now it's going to run looks like it's going to run the post create command from hatch, which I'm not sure if hatch is even installed by then. And then integrated profiles Linux, default profile. It says it's not permitted. So let's let the AI know and see what it says. So let's see if it actually fixes anything. So this is giving me a very compromised solution that I do not find to be acceptable. It's basically saying you have to manually remember that for this very particular code space, you have to go run this exact order using the user interface in order to make things work how you would expect them to work out of the box. That is not an acceptable solution. So this is a common thing I've also encountered with AI, is that it kind of gets into this little rut and says, well, here's the best you can do. And that's not good enough. I'm also correct. Here you can see inside the post create command, here's where we install hatch. So you cannot have it use hatch to run the command. So I'm going to go ahead and undo these. another approach is you have this default interpreter path. If we point it to the hatch environment, I'm wondering if that's going to work. So let's see. We switch to any Python file. We don't see that, but we do have this. So we can go to our terminal that does use that environment. We can say which Python. Well, that sucks. Yeah, so that's gonna change most likely. So that's not gonna work. So there's other ways of doing this. Hatch is probably designed to create these kind of environments, which is fine, I suppose, if you're running it in a place where you don't care about that kind of consistency, but we do. So then the next question is, can we just sidestep hatch for the purposes of this dev container? Is it just unnecessary complexity? So this virtual environment is really perfect for it. It's what the whole point is. The question is, where did it come from, and can we start using it? So let's see if the AI can go and tell us where that came from. Okay, so right now it's a little ignorant in the sense that it's saying the virtual environment directory is typically created, and I don't care what it's typically created. I want to know what actually did it. Like I'm pretty sure, unless something changed since I last looked, that virtual environment was not put in there by VS Code or Codespaces. If I wasn't using AI, I would just search for the V environment directory, but I will also say it's a default name, so it's entirely possible that you get this configuration that has a name way different that creates it. Okay, so now it's still confused. I'm noticing I'm not using a better model anymore. So maybe that's why. Maybe that's the issue here. Just silently switch to a worse one. Okay, hold on. I might have to start paying for this. So it looks like I lost codecs when I did the rebuild. That is infuriating. So it wasn't using codecs at all, which is why I was getting really bad answers. And so you can kind of understand when you talk about what did this thing used to do versus what it does now. What you were seeing is what it used to do, and you can see it very quickly was like, I can't solve it, sorry. So let's try switching to codecs and see if we can get ourselves a better answer. So this is kind of frustrating, is that Copilot and codecs have really similar interfaces. So it's very easy to overlook the fact that you're not using one or the other. So let's try this again. So let's try this. I'm going to tell it to update the dev container configuration so that PyTest and the base Python installation works the same as hatch shell Python. Let's see what changes it makes. So far, at least, it seems to understand my intent here. Okay, so we're back to seeing this again. Or did I never remove that? Maybe I never removed that. What does it do? Oh, so it soft links the Python environment for everybody on the dev container to the hatch environment. In a dev container, that can be okay. There are certainly cases where you want stuff split, but this might not be one of them. All right, let's try rebuilding this. So let's try rebuilding the container. Okay, so our command failed with hatch command not found. And also it undid the extension. Like, that is just really obnoxious. It's back to GitHub silently coming in here and being like, no, you got to use me. There it is again. I got to install it again. So the question is, why did hatch fail? There were Python directory, creating hatch Python environment. Yes, but where did it fail? So I didn't know what hatch was. So we install hatch. I'm guessing because you typically, when you in Unix, when you install something, oftentimes you gotta go make yourself a new shell before it shows up, which is the big pain in the butt with this. Let's see if Codex is... Nope, I gotta log in again. Ugh. All right, let's see if Codex can figure out the issue. So let's see if it can figure out what the issue is. All right, I guess we're just going to test it again. So on our rebuild, we're still seeing an issue. Oh, and we lost our conversation because I have to re-log in each time. Is there history? There's no history. I lost everything. So Codex does have its own IDE. I haven't tried it yet. I'm a little skeptical they have any dev container support, so I'm not super enthralled to jump on that. I mean, doesn't this feel like a really simple use case? And yet it's so challenging, right? So this is giving me a plan? What is this? Alright, so we'll, I guess, try that plan. I mean, for me, the funny thing is this symlink. Like, I don't feel like that's a necessity. It feels like trying to mess with the system Python path is a good way to have a dev container feature or GitHub code spaces just stomp on what you're doing. So it says it made the changes. We'll try it one more time. If this doesn't work, I'm just going to basically like do a fresh like, hey, just install this using a virtual environment, using stuff that I know that works, and not trying to like preserve this hatch thing, which I don't fully comprehend what the value is. Okay, so we made some progress. It does look like that now that we have the Python environment set up, we don't have the test environment set up, which seems to be built off of the original one because it says the extra dependencies are additional PyTest things, but it omits PyTest itself. So let me see if there's a way to just merge these two into a single install. Okay, so maybe there's another way of approaching this. So we can see that we have this sort of separate configuration here in our dev container, in what we're doing for our dev container, and you really don't need that. Like when you're installing a hatch environment, it is doing this exact sort of thing. So maybe the solution here is to create a new hatch environment, and this new hatch environment is going to be exclusive for the developer container, and it's just going to repeat what's in those other ones and not try to be anything fancy. It's just simply, I'm a developer, I want to do stuff, so give me everything installed. So here I'm asking the AI, can you create a new environment for the developer container, and it's just going to have everything in it that I would need. And then we're going to get rid of those pip installs that we have because they should be unnecessary. Oh, that looks wrong. Hold on. So it's trying to install ReactPy. That was the issue that we had before where we made changes and we weren't seeing them because it was running out of site packages. Steer. It's unfortunate that AI just doesn't know that. It feels like something it could learn and then just know not to do anymore. Does not install. Okay, so another thing you can do is add an env file. You should know how to just use it. I did it wrong, but it's quicker for me to fix it. Pretty sure in code spaces you have to have this. Alright, let's try rebuilding. Alright, so we don't seem to have any errors this time, so that's good. Our extension was missing for bun. And let's go ahead and install it. And then we're going to go click on this and say add to dev container. That way it's going to be there whenever we do a rebuild. Unfortunately, for things like codecs, we can't rely on a developer in an open source repository to use codecs, so we can't add that automatically. I don't know if that in any way will help with the fact that I have to log in every single time. I think as long as you don't tear down the code space, it's not an issue. So it's just more of an obnoxious aspect of trying to build the dev container. All right, so we have our tests. The question is, can we run them? So we'll start with the bun tests. So they all passed. Now let's try our Python tests. Looks like we're getting errors. So we'll need to see what those errors are about. So it's complaining about playwright missing. Now, if I remember correctly, Hatch did some sort of install. So maybe that's what's missing. If we go look at our configuration, playwright, says it's right there. So I don't know off the top of my head. Let's give AI a chance to answer this. Let's try that. All right, so it looks like it identified what would be the issue. Wants me to rebuild the dev container or rerun post create. Or we can just do this. So let's try running this command. So this looks familiar. I believe this is what would happen if you tried to run it using the hatch command. We're essentially bypassing the hatch command right now. So it looks like it used the post create script to do the install, but I swear Hatch knew how to install this on its own. So let's make sure that we're doing this the right way. I'm going to challenge the AI and say, I think Hatch did it automatically. Is that not possible? And see if it goes and changes its approach. So it's offering to centralize it. Before going down that route, because I know that's going to result in changing like downstream changes, it's oftentimes better to do things in like atomic steps, and then that way it's very clear like how you got to where you're going. And if you try to do too much in a single pull request, it can be confusing and scary for people. The main thing here is that I swear a hatch command installed it. So couldn't we run that hatch command? Okay, so now it uses the hatch command to install it. So now it's in one place, and I think this is the intended use. It would run that automatically, but because we're actually bypassing hatch after the initial install, we're manually running that call. Had we switched the hatch and just decided to do that, it should work correctly. Let's go see if our tests run. So we go ahead and run our tests again. Rerun failed tests, sure. Does seem a little slower, but I'm not seeing an error yet. Okay, we can see that our tests are now running. So I'm guessing they're all going to pass. Okay, so all of our tests have passed, so that is good. Now the next thing we're going to do is rebuild the container one more time and make sure that the tests actually pass on a clean rebuild. All right, we're letting our dev container build. All right, so it finished building. Let's go ahead and see. Here's our tests. Let's just run all of them. I only see ReactPy. So where is bun? Okay, it's not installed. I thought we added that. It's missing, so that would explain it. And now it's there. So I'm not sure why that got taken out. Maybe it got stomped on by the AI. But our tests, I think, are passing. Yep. So everything looks good. Now, it's worth calling out that with a dev container, it's usually an ongoing maintenance operation. There's definitely other stuff that you can do that I haven't touched here. And the best way to approach that is to just deal with it when you get to it, rather than trying to just knock it out all at once in one exhausting operation. All right, so one last change that we're doing is we're going to have the AI make documentation updates as necessary. We'll see if they're any good. So it looks like it thinks it found a mistake. So let's review the changes. So it looks like the PyScript side didn't get updated with the correct type hints. Oh, I see what's going on. So it's got the root component constructor type here. It looks like... Did it undo it? It looks like it undid our cleanup. It made it more complicated again. Oh wait, no. It just added the component constructor. So it forgot about why we made that change. So we can go ahead and just, I think, revert that back. This is fine. I'll leave that in there. It seems to have added a redundant test. And just to double check, we are using GPT 5.4. So I'm going to remove this test. Same with here. It's worth calling out that I didn't ask it to make tests. I said just update the documentation. And it kind of, tests are a form of documentation. But I did say specifically like where it should expect to see these changes. So I'm going to get rid of this too. I don't really feel like looking at those changes. They weren't expected. And actually, I don't see any changes to any of the documentation. That's what I wrote. So sure, we'll just save all of those. All right, let me poke at it and see if that can help. Maybe I'll help give it a little hint here too. Like we have a docs directory. Okay, so it doesn't think there's any user-facing documentation pages that are done by hand. It thinks everything is built automatically. And that might be correct. So I guess we just won't worry about it. So it looks like the way they have this repository set up is that if you have even slightly missed test coverage, which is to say there's a line of code that no test hits, then that's a failure. It looks like it's in that utils.py. I don't remember changing the logic that would have done that, so we'll need to investigate what that is. Maybe there's a line number in here. Okay, so just saying there's 39 statements and we miss one, missing 58. Is that supposed to be saying line 58? So we'll see if Claude can clarify what that 58 means. So it is line 58. So we can go to that line. Okay, so it looks like the issue is that it snuck this in here. And I must have overlooked it. We don't need that because components are always callable. Okay, so there's a little bit of back and forth that ended up happening that I decided to just cut out because it was kind of irritating to watch more than anything. As far as the logic that was settled on, it's this, and then for tests, we have 2 new tests that were added. And then for getting tests to run, because we don't have our dev container config anymore because it's on the other branch, I actually lose that. So I need to go to configure tests again and tell it to do pytest in tests. Once that gets merged in and branches are based off of it, you don't have this problem. We can see that we have the little play buttons here now, so now we can run our new tests. and see that they do in fact pass. Okay, so what did AI help with? Well, it was able to research how to use things, it suggested commands to run, and it even tested the commands locally just to make sure that they worked like expected. So that was great. Uh, it did help us get a functioning developer environment. I mean, it did still require assistance from me, but it definitely helped. And it was able to quickly determine that there are no document changes to write, which is something that would have taken me a bit more time to figure out. There were a few cases where it was counterproductive. Sometimes it was too aggressive with making changes. This resulted in having to kind of look it over and then deciding to just completely undo it. And then also, this, I don't know if this is really the fault of AI as a concept, but right now, both AI development and developer tools can lack maturity and create unnecessary friction. So the big question is AI, could AI do this? Is AI taking your job? Well, hopefully this isn't your job. It doesn't seem like it needs to be, and honestly, AI can't take this over soon enough. I think it's a good portion of the way there already, but it still has a ways to go. One of the things getting in the way is that human opinions on what is acceptable does deviate from what AI thinks is acceptable. So, for example, if something is slow and taking a long time, humans would say this is intolerable, but I could see AI really not knowing whether that's a good or bad thing. And finally, it's the thing is that I didn't really have to do this. I was doing it because no one else did it first. And then once it's done, you're kind of don't need to revisit it. And so simply because it's a chore, people tend to avoid it, and it becomes a bigger pain in the butt than it needs to be if it was dealt with on a more frequent basis.